I'm Lee C. Camp, and this is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life.
I was born in New York City, and my parents came from Iran, and they had one suitcase of clothing and two suitcases of books.
That's poet, musician, and translator Haleh Liza Gafori describing her first encounter with the Sufi poet Rumi.
When he calls upon us to feel this love within ourselves, it is then also to apply it in the world.
We discuss her acclaimed translations of Rumi's work and what his poetry still has to teach us 800 years after it was written.
Feeling guilt for feeling pleasure, that's your sin, that's your chain. Shatter it, tear it off. Then invite the Puritans over. Today is an invitation to ecstasy. Let them know.
All coming right up. Hello, friends. Lee C. Camp here. Do you ever wish you had more folks to discuss the conversations we offer on No Small Endeavor? Something like a podcast listening club where you could engage big ideas about what it means to live life well and then discuss it with friends and companions? If so, you have stumbled upon the announcement you have been waiting for. We're pleased to announce the start of Endeavor Together, our new initiative that equips and nurtures close-knit communities to talk about the things you actually want to talk about. Each small group conversation series is built upon our podcast content and provides you with super easy to use content with questions, videos, links, and guidance so that you or any good and willing soul can host small group conversations exploring what it means to live a good life. Maybe you'll meet in homes around a table, maybe in a coffee shop or local park, maybe at work during lunch hour, maybe in a church Sunday school class. What we are providing is the scaffolding for good conversation. The rest is up to you. And here's the best part. Thanks to generous support from the Lilly Endowment, it's free. The first two series have been released. The first, Let's Disagree Better, and the second, Vulnerability. Get started today. Visit NoSmallEndeavor.com and click on Endeavor Together. Again, go to NoSmallEndeavor.com and click on Endeavor Together. Enjoy. I love the autumn. I just spent a weekend with a friend cutting and splitting firewood for the winter. With the days getting shorter, the summer chores fewer, and the fall colors on their way, everything seems to be slowing down. Just delightful. And then in the midst of all those creature comforts are yet another, our new bowl and branch signature sheets. Yes, those bowl and branch signature sheets are buttery soft, breathable to sleep in, and made with the highest quality 100% organic cotton in durable designs and come with a 30-night worry-free guarantee. We are indeed having no worries and a great deal of delight with our new bowl and branch sheets. So start building your sanctuary of comfort this fall with Bowl and Branch. For a limited time, get 20% off your first set of sheets plus free shipping at bowlandbranch.com/NSE. That's Bowl and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/NSE to save 20% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions apply.
Did you know 3 out of 4 U.S. homes have toxic chemicals in their tap water? Even though contaminated water looks clear, it could put you at risk for devastating health concerns, including fatigue, hormone disruption, cognitive decline, even cancer. Surprisingly, standard fridge and pitcher filters do little to remove most contaminants, and bottled water contains microplastics. So what's the solution? Introducing AquaTrue, the countertop water purifier tested and certified to remove 84 contaminants, including chlorine, lead, forever chemicals, and microplastics. Its patented 4-stage reverse osmosis system goes way beyond ordinary filters for pure, healthy water you can trust. No plumbing, no installation. AquaTrue has been featured in Business Insider, Popular Science, and named Best Countertop Water Filter by Good Housekeeping. Join 98% of customers who say their drinking water is cleaner, safer, and healthier. Go to aquatrue.com now for 20% off your purifier using promo code NSE. AquaTrue even comes with a 30-day best tasting water guarantee. That's aquatrue.com, AQUATRU.com. Promo code NSE.
I'm Lee C. Camp. This is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life. This is part 2 of our series entitled, What is Poetry's Role When the World is Burning? We take that question from poet Christian Wiman, which he raises in his memoir, My Bright Abyss. In the midst of war, climate devastation, and our own clinging to privilege, what is the role of poetry when the world is burning? We're in the midst of exploring that question with 3 celebrated poets. Last week, we spoke with 3-term U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, and today we turn to the 13th century Sufi mystic and poet Rumi by way of a lovely conversation with poet, musician, and translator Haleh Liza Gafori. Haleh was born in New York City to Persian parents who left Iran in the early 1970s. She completed her undergraduate studies at Stanford and completed her MFA at the City College of New York. Haleh has translated and published 2 widely praised volumes of Rumi's poetry, which we'll have the privilege of discussing today. Haleh's performed at venues and sites as diverse as Carnegie Hall and Bonnaroo, and has served as a MacDowell Fellow and as a recipient of a prestigious grant from the New York State Council on the Arts. Here's our lovely conversation with Haleh Liza Gafori. Welcome, Haleh.
Thank you so much. It's nice to see you, Lee.
If we were to kind of put you on the spot and say, what's your 1-paragraph answer to that question? What is poetry's role when the world is burning? How would you engage that?
Yeah, I think I would start with, why is the world burning? There are many answers for that, but one of the main ones in a way is, I think, irreverence for life and decision after decision after decision that doesn't have as its foundation an utter and complete recognition of our interconnection, of our interdependence. And I think getting ourselves out of that and trying to move towards a paradigm of cooperation and camaraderie. And what is poetry's role in that? Well, I would say poetry tries to bring us to the present moment. It tries to remind us to use our 5 senses, to notice things. Some poetry invites us to praise, invites us to recognize our interconnection, invites us to feel. So much of these disasters, too, are based on plain old human emotions of utter and complete fear, and then also greed, right? So if we were to really dig into these even as youngsters in school, I mean, we can talk about parabolas and the history dates of whatever, 1776 and this and that. But we could also be talking about what are the emotions that we're dealing with constantly on a daily basis in human life, and how are these affecting us on grand scales, right? There's many, many ways of looking at it. But I do think poetry helps us to sort of unravel some of this, and also helps us to feel our interconnection, and also helps us to feel reverence.
Thank you for that. Lovely. And we'll get to dig into a lot of the particularities of your response here in a moment. I'd like to kind of jump back to some of your autobiography and your own kind of experience, your familial experience. So your parents come to the United States in the early 1970s from Iran?
That's right.
What are some of your earliest memories of that, of how that shaped you into the person that you have become?
I was born in New York City, and my parents, as you said, came from Iran, and they had 1 suitcase of clothing and 2 suitcases of books.
I love that.
So they brought,
I love that imagery.
Yeah, so they brought literature with them, and not just Persian literature, Iranian literature, but also world literature, some of it in translation. I mean, they were reading Dostoevsky in Iran and F. Scott Fitzgerald in Iran, some of it in English, some of it in translation. So they brought the books that they cared for most and loved most. And among those, of course, was a copy from my grandfather of Maulana Rumi, his book, The Masnavi. They loved the literature. They were speaking it aloud in the house. My father was reciting Rumi's poetry. They were having gatherings called Shab-e-Sher, which means night of poetry, where friends, their Iranian friends that they met here, some of whom they knew back in Iran, would gather once a month and recite poems. And so I'd hear this stuff. It was in the house. It was swirling in the air.
What do you remember about those nights of poetry readings at your home?
Well, I mean, I was a kid and I didn't really care about poetry at the time. I also was more interested in being just an American kid. But sometimes we'd be on the fringes, we'd be listening a little bit. And I remember their love for it. I remember how it seemed to change the air in the room sometimes. On occasion, when a certain poem was recited, it was like, whoa. And of course, they were reciting in Persian. So at the time, I didn't necessarily understand the poems, but I could sense their importance.
Are there other key events for you that captured your attention with regard to your subsequent love for the arts or love for language or love for writing that kind of placed a call upon your life in some sense?
In the household, my father would recite a line from Flannery O'Connor or a line from Langston Hughes and the opening of The Great Gatsby. And he would talk about Diary of a Madman by Gogol. So he would bring up different stories. And eventually, I too got into literature. And I remember reading Eugene Ionesco's Theater of the Absurd, which I thought actually, in a way, when I look back, had this impact on me, that Theater of the Absurd kind of like takes us out of a situation and gives us a weird bird's eye view. I think mystical poetry in a different way gives us a bird's eye view. So both of these pulled me out of the present and gave me a different angle on things when I was young and made me wonder about, why are things the way they are? Why is the Hudson River a toxic mess? I mean, it was such a beautiful river. Why did the doorman say to me when I said, I'd like to swim in that river will eat your toes. Right? And so I was a kid and I was able to sort of hover above what was going on and think, this is such a weird way of doing things. And also stories about the bombings of Grenada and the threat of the Russians or not threat of the Russians, or we're imagining it or we're not imagining it, or we're the threat, they're the threat. We're all the threat. I mean, at the end of the day, the enemy lies within as well. And it's like this constant sort of sense of X versus Y, X versus Y. I wondered about these things. And my father also wondered about them. And so the conversation in the kitchen table was oftentimes sociopolitical and literary.
How do you think that a complicated sociopolitical history of Iran and the United States has played into your psyche or your way of looking at the world?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
I mean, it strikes me that you can have at least, at a minimum, two huge realities: that the American imperialism, and then a sort of religious fundamentalism in reaction to that American imperialism. But how has that resonated in you and your way of looking at the world?
Yeah, that also gave me a sense that this is not really about X versus Y. Like, we're both a mess. I mean, what I saw growing up was excessive materialism and militarism. And I knew that there were proxy wars going on and stuff. My dad would talk about it and my mother would paint these things. I mean, my mother has a painting of a soldier chasing a little girl. And if you look at this painting, she painted in the 80s. It was a big painting. If you look at this painting, it looks like what's happening right now in Gaza. It looks like what happened in Iraq. It looks like what happened in Afghanistan. And then in Iran, I was aware of a sense of tremendous corruption, restrictions on people's freedoms, and so on and so forth. My mother, her father questioned whether she should get educated past 7th grade. And he was very, very conservative. And he wanted her also, at the time that she was a child, to wear the chador, which is the full-length black veil. And my mother didn't want to wear it. And at that time, only very, very conservative people wore that. So she would go down the street, she would tear it off. She ended up going to medical school, and graduating from medical school when my father graduated in a miniskirt and go-go boots. So my mother was a rebel, and she had a lot of disdain for what was happening there, and frankly, for the Islamic Republic, which was really, really doing a lot of disasters. America in the meantime was doing a lot of stuff all around the world that we're actually now seeing the effects of 40 years later. I mean, whether we were messing with stuff in Latin America and the Middle East and even South America and even bombing the little island of Grenada, and all of this because of these doom-ridden narratives that were being spun. Which ones were actually true? Which ones were exaggerated? And what was really at the source of it? I mean, it's a lot of greed.
Rumi, for those who might be unfamiliar with even some of the basics of who he was and the great significant figure he was, kind of give us maybe a quick overview of key elements in his story, and then how you began to be so taken by his work and how that's come to influence you so much.
I'll start just to say, of course, he was born in the 13th century in 1206. He was born in present-day Afghanistan or present-day Tajikistan. People aren't sure. His main language was Persian. That's why we call him a Persian poet. But this was before national boundaries. And he moved across the Middle East with his family for like 10 years or so. One of the reasons was the father wanted to leave and he wanted to preach in a bigger mosque. He was a theologian. And so Rumi, as a child, was exposed to a lot of scripture, the Quran, and also was fasting and praying, and also was hearing literature, and also was exposed to different ideas that were moving through the air at the time. And they went on this journey, as I said, partly because the father wanted to work elsewhere, but also eventually they were fleeing ahead of the Mongol invasions. So Genghis Khan of the Mongolian peoples was marching across Central Asia and burning villages and so on and so forth. So in a way, they were partly for a time refugees. Eventually, they got to Konya, which is present-day Turkey, and they lived there. And his father was immediately given the position in the town as a big preacher, theologian there. He passed away, and then everyone thought, well, now Rumi will come in. And Rumi was called at the time Maulana. They were calling him Maulana, which means our sage, our master, because people loved him already. He hadn't even written one poem yet, but people felt his magnetism and his charm, and he was a great storyteller, and he was son of this illustrious man, and they trusted that he could take over. And he didn't want to at the time. So he fled and went to Damascus and studied for 7 years. And when he came back, it was like, okay, I'll do it now. So then he was preaching. And he was, again, very magnetic, very charming, preaching for thousands of people, maybe 10,000 would show up. It seems hard to believe at that time, but it seems that is so. And then around the age of 38, when he was at the apex of his career, along came a man named Shams of Tabriz, who was about 22 years older. And he had been a very humble sage, wise man, mystic, knew everything about the mystics, had read the books that the Mongols had burned, was called Bird, Parande. He would just go from one city to another. He was very itinerant. He had his rush mat he would sleep on and was able to move on the go. And so he came looking for a friend, looking for a disciple, but he wanted a special disciple only. He wanted someone who had already reached the top of the mountain, who already had wings, and he could just push and they would fly. And he felt sure that that was Maulana Rumi. As I said, Rumi was famous, so he knew of him. So he thought, maybe that's him. Maybe he's the one that I can pass this on to. And at the same time, Rumi was longing for a friend, longing for a guide, longing to really walk the talk, and was a little bit wary of fame, not sure that being at the apex of this ladder was really what he wanted. So Shams came in and whisked him away. Let's go and deeply listen to music, and let's practice the whirling dance. And these were two things that some considered, not everyone, but some considered blasphemous, some considered a distraction, but Rumi did. He went right in, listening to music, doing the whirling dance, and he started to feel something in him open. And he felt like, this practice was a portal to revelation. And he was feeling immense love for his teacher. And then the disciples drove Shams from town, perhaps out of jealousy. They were like, what did you do with our teacher? Because Rumi didn't want to teach anymore, didn't want to preach. And so they drove him out of town, and then Rumi was depressed. And then Rumi was like, oh God, where is he? And then he found out he's in Damascus, and he told his son to go call him back. Shams came back. They went back in. Poetry. And the first four poems he wrote were the poems saying, come back, Shams, come back.
You're listening to No Small Endeavor and a conversation with Haleh Liza Gafori. I love hearing from you. Tell us what you're reading, who you're paying attention to, or send us feedback about today's episode. You can reach me at lee@nosmallendeavor.com. You can get show notes for this episode in your podcast app or wherever you listen. These notes include links to resources mentioned in this episode and a full transcript. We would be most appreciative if you'd go to your favorite podcast app and write up a glowing 5-star review of No Small Endeavor, because those reviews help extend the reach of the beauty, truth, and goodness we are seeking to sow in the world. Coming up, Haleh and I continue the discussion of Rumi's poetry, how reading Rumi helped her overcome anxiety in her 20s, and what he teaches us about the tyranny of the self. If you love No Small Endeavor, I suspect you will not want to miss joining us in Nashville for our Thanksgiving variety show on November 23. This year, we'll be joined by Sharon McMahon, #1 New York Times bestselling author and podcaster. Sharon is a longtime government and law educator who became known as America's government teacher during the 2020 election, when she went viral for breaking down complex topics with a steadfast commitment to the facts. It'll be a night of thoughtful conversation, moving music, and a room full of folks all in pursuit of no small endeavor. This year it's at the beautiful Skirmerhorn Symphony Center here in Nashville. We'll be joined by the Choir Room, Grammy award-winning artist Allison Russell, and a full band for an amazing night you will not want to miss. Mark your calendars for November 23, and don't wait. Go get your tickets now at the link in the show notes or at nosmallendeavor.com/events.
Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast Gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful, and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast Gems.
You at one point refer to Rumi as a dazzler and a good friend. What's that look like for you to have Rumi as a good friend?
Oh, he showed me that there was another way to use my mind, meaning my mind was in a state of anxiety as a child and adolescent. I had an anxiety disorder, actually, a very, very, very intense one, frankly. And I remember reading a line where he says, exit the tangles of fear thinking. And I thought, you can do that? So that means that fear thinking is a certain type of thinking, and there are other types of thinking. Because, when you're a fish swimming in the waters of your own patterns, right? Your own mental patterns. And so he was the one that sort of turned me on to other possibilities, other ways of managing my own mind, steering my own mind. And he really, in that way, was an opening for me around the age of 20. I thought, well, wait a second, I should get out of the tangles of fear thinking. So let me try and do that. And then, eventually I was singing some of his lyrics in Persian, and I was sharing those songs. And then eventually in 2016, so much, much later, I started to translate. And once I started to translate, he became a very, very close companion. I was with his words, waking up with them, walking through the park with them, taking the train with them. And I would say he's a very friendly guide. He confesses his own struggle. When he says, Dide por dard budam, kase por zahr budam. This is a line that surprises people, but he's saying an aching eye, as in the eye we see through, an aching eye seeing through pain. A stewing pot of poison, I was both. Reaching for the antidote, I touched compassion, I touched mercy. So there's so much in his poetry about being able to open ourselves and cultivate the love within us and move beyond whatever type of thinking is stifling and oppressive to ourselves or to others. And also, he's such a wonderful writer and a dazzler, as I said. And so it's such a pleasure to dig into his work and to hear the images and the leaps of thought that he has and the beautiful sort of associations that he makes.
I'm so fascinated by your account that here you are, a 20-year-old, and you see yourself being caught up in the tangle of fearful thinking, and it allows you to recognize that, and then you make a decision to seek to be free of that, and it sounds like you, in effect, were.
Yeah, well, it took some time.
So tell us a little bit about what that time looked like.
It involved, different healing modalities. I did go to try standard therapy. There's all kinds of things. I mean, honestly, exercise is really great for getting the blood flowing is really important. Meditation is very helpful. I think a lot of the beauty of digging into poetry did something good for me. Listening deeply to music was a good way to use my mind and I went into the jungles of South America and had experiences there that were very helpful. I went into Al-Anon, and Al-Anon is a place for, they say, families and friends of alcoholics. I found some relief there too. The idea of surrendering to a higher power. For somebody who grew up mostly in an atheist or agnostic family, that was a very strange thing to think about. But that also I found helpful. And of course, it's the God of your understanding. So it's not necessarily that you have to become a certain religion, but that you're actually aligning yourself with a sense that there is a boundless divine love in existence. And I don't doubt that for a moment. I believe that the only reason we exist is because we are expressions of some force's desire to see life. We are an expression of life force. The desire to live is running through us, because otherwise all these cells wouldn't be working in harmony. And sometimes they go out of harmony. That is true. But everywhere around us, life flourishes. And so just to feel that and to surrender to that.
In your book, Gold, your first volume of translation of Rumi's poetry, that sort of boundless divine love comes through over and over and over again in that volume in such compelling ways. I'm particularly taken by a poem on page 43. Would you maybe read that one for us?
Sure. Sufis arrive?
Yes.
Sufis arrive from the left and right, wandering door to door, alley to alley. Where's the wine? The heart is a door, the soul an alley, and the wine flows from God's jug. The cupbearer opens it, calls out, "Greetings, friends. To drink this wine is not a sin. To feel ecstasy is not a sin. Feeling guilt for feeling pleasure, that's your sin. That's your chain. Shatter it. Tear it off. Then invite the Puritans over. Today is an invitation to ecstasy. Let them know If they turn away, let them go. Let them judge. Let them talk. Let them smear your good name. You'll have less to guard. Lover, the eyes of lovers behold you. Your friend is the sea.
So lovely. I resonate so much with, there's so much here that this is an invitation to, rather than thinking that life is about being bound up and constrained,
Yes.
it's this invitation to freedom, right?
Yes.
A true freedom, rather than an indulgent freedom that leads us to all sorts of our own pain of our own making. But this beautiful vision. But I don't know, any other commentary on this particular poem, or anything, other ways you see this in Rumi's work?
Yeah, well, I love what you just said, and I agree 100%. There's a constant invitation to feel joy and to not feel shame for joy, not feel guilt for deep pleasure. We're talking about the pleasure of being alive, allowing ourselves to tap into that, to taste that, to recognize that as a possibility, that it's not just about like getting things and possessing things, right? But that the mere experience of being alive, there is and can be a tremendous natural joy there. And the invitation to feel that, uncover it. There's another poem where he says, lovers, why fear disgrace? Why should you feel ashamed? Love is your unshakable kingdom. Love is your throne, your home. And he says later in that poem, grim and somber, feeling guilt for simple pleasures, joy is not a sin. If you've made a habit of drinking vinegar, don't blame the vine. Ditch the vinegar. Ditch the vinegar and ditch the vendor who doesn't deal in life's nectar. Pour love's wine and quit peddling misery.
Oh my. Being raised in the Bible Belt, that depicts one or two of the preachers that I had to listen to a lot as a kid. And so there's a sort of deep resonance in me of saying, this is such an important, crucial distinction that we have to make in our conceptions of the divine, right? Is this an invitation to joy? Is it an invitation to living fully alive? Or is it a kind of puritanical love of vinegar itself?
Yeah. Ditch the vinegar and ditch the vendor who doesn't deal in life's nectar. I mean, life's nectar. What is our purpose here? But to revere and praise and enjoy this actual miraculous earth and what it gives us, these five senses, this ability to see and touch and hold and care for each other. That itself is such a great pleasure.
Then there's also, of course, this insistence that this invitation to joy required the hard work or the surrender that allowed a release of the tyranny of the self. And that we do live so often under this sort of deep bondage to self. And we only get to that place of living fully alive if we can find some sort of way to let go of that tyranny or to get out from underneath that tyranny. Page 20, liberate yourself from the tyranny of self. Be humble as soil, and you will see every particle of soil is drunk on love by the Creator's design. Other kind of commentary there on this call to freedom from the tyranny of the self?
The very first poem my father recited when he says, Yek khane porz mastan nor residan divanegane bandi zanjirha daridan. So this is about the breaking through the chains. And over again, Rumi says this in poetry. Once again, I broke through the chains. And he's talking about those mind-forged manacles, right, that William Blake talks about, that when we chain ourselves up with our own thinking and dogma and so on and so forth, and the invitation again is to do the work to actually feel as expansive and as relaxed as we can while we're here on this earth, without a denial that there's so much to grieve too. There's no denial about the challenges of human existence. No denial about that. But just ways of saying, well, at least let's not manufacture more pain with our minds.
Yeah. That line from William Blake just stands out to me. Our mind forged manacles, and the ways in which we so often are our own worst enemy by the way in which we subject ourselves to these various sorts of bondages. And Rumi also has, in your volume on gold, the metaphor of fire that runs through there, and that it's a sort of a painful process, potentially, of freeing ourselves from those mind-forged manacles. But how do you see that metaphor of fire play out in his work?
Yeah, the fire does show up a lot. Sometimes it's, love's fire, that sometimes love is a force that burns away, for instance, egoic narratives, or that burns away that sense of what we have to be, our old ways, like in one poem, he says, the old trap of my old ways, right? Again, this invitation to see the possibility of renewal, of clearing the ground and renewing within the self, right? And in this poem in gold, he says, just the other day, fire whispered to smoke, no stick of aloes wood shuns me. From its gnarls and knots, my flames unfurl a honeyed musk of amber, fruit, and flower. It profits in perishing. It welcomes me, even thanks me. At the doorway to emptiness, all knots come loose. Cheers, my flame-eating friend, and love-slain victor. We saw you rise from the dead. We bow in awe.
I've thought for years that so much of theology is a matter of tone, and I tell my students this sometimes, that any given phrase can have a fundamentally different meaning simply depending upon the tone that we use with it, right? Both in the Hebrew Bible, in the New Testament, here in this passage from Rumi, we have very similar language about fire. And you can either see fire as this sort of wrathful, vengeful, I'll get you kind of God, or this is the way life is, yield to the possibility to let our impurities, our bondages be burned up and thus be free. Those are two very different kinds of tones, right? And it's clear what the tone is here within your translation there.
Yes. And it's the metaphor of, using these kinds of visions, because a lot of times also love, as we said, love's fire, and there's also water. A lot of times a love is expressed as water, that's watering the ground within us and between us and allowing gardens to grow, right? So there's all of these sort of metaphors running through the work that can help us as we try to move through the challenge of human existence.
Coming up is a short break, followed by Haleh's live poetry and musical performance from the MacDowell National Benefit, and our discussion on the social implications of Rumi's work.
It's easy to know you want to make a change in your life, but it is hard to actually do it. How to Be a Better Human from TED is a podcast for when self-help feels too daunting or just not for you. I'm Chris Duffy, the host of How to Be a Better Human, and trust me, I do not have it all figured out. But join me as I talk to experts about actually attainable ways we can try to improve our lives. Whether it's facing fears, setting boundaries, cleaning your house, or all sorts of other topics. Find How to Be a Better Human wherever you get your podcasts.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. What do you bring to a holiday party? Simple, a bottle of Casamigos. Because nothing gets the party started like a Casamigos margarita, which isn't just for summer. In fact, it's the perfect pour all year round. Casamigos is the gift that always feels right. Because anything goes with my Casamigos. Please drink responsibly. Imported by Casamigos Spirits Company, White Plains, New York. Casamigos Tequila, 40% alcohol by volume.
Clearly, with at least from the depiction of Rumi that I see here in you, the call to let go of ego, the call to let these fires of purification come over us so that we can live more freely, it's not merely an individualistic pursuit, but also a sort of social call, right?
Yes.
How would you elucidate that kind of link between this individual and social elements, facets of this work?
That's a very important question. And I do believe that what's happening inside a person impacts what they do in the world. And when we have people taking the reins on the world, who are they? What's going on with them psychologically? How are they doing? And then systems are created based on the lust for dominion of a few, the greed of a few. And so are we going to allow a sort of psychotic patriarchal force to take over and over and over again in the world? Or are we going to allow a force that is saying to us, you know what? We're all interconnected. We're here on this planet for a finite time, all of us. What are we here to do but try to learn how to live in harmony and live well? This earth is so generous. You throw some seeds in the ground and you tend them and food comes out. I mean, can we not imagine that there could be fruit trees all over the place? I mean, really, like the garden. I'm talking about the divine garden. How is it we couldn't have gone a different road? We could have. But it takes a certain kind of thinking, a certain kind of belief system, and it takes bravery. It takes a lot of bravery because it is fear that takes us into a place of we must hoard, we must dominate, there's not enough. If they have it, then we don't have it, so we have to make sure we have it and they don't have it. This is a type of thinking that creates a lot of misery in the world. And I don't see a large percentage of people winning from that. So I think in a way, the philosophy that asks us actually to relax and to feel pleasure can be then, applied. Like if we imagined legislation was designed to help people in this world, on this earth, actually relax more. That's totally different. And then we would say, well, the river has value. The river is a place of beauty. It's a place of leisure. People can swim in it. People can boat on it. No, we're not going to dump chemicals. We're not going to dump 1.3 million pounds of PCBs in the river just because that saves somebody some money. Just because that's maximizing profit. We're not going to do that because that's actually going to create a lot of stress, and not just stress for us humans, creating scarcity, for instance, because the river was teeming with life and teeming with food. What if our legislation was designed to reduce stress? When he says, "Andar goshayesh adam an uqdeha goshud," the knots untie. Right? And he does speak of this state of emptiness, the silence in the mind, this sort of release from calculation and allowing a sort of calm to overtake the mind, which is a soulful kind of state of being where we can say, yes, things are scary. Yes, there are people who might try and harm us here or there. But if we create our entire system of living based on the idea that we have to be both on the defense and the offense, we make a mess of the world. And I swear, there's really other ways of doing things. And I'd say the majority of people would wish for that in the world. When he calls upon us to imagine this love, to feel this love within ourselves, it is then also to apply it in the world and to walk this world with that love, to imagine that perhaps legislation could reflect love instead of reflect greed and fear. And to think that that's naive is unfortunate. It's not naive. It's just another option.
So going back to our original question from Chris Wiman, what's poetry's role when the world is burning? And one of the ways I hear you answering that is that it's to engender a new imagination that a different world is possible.
Yes. That's a beautiful way of putting it.
There's also this element of critique, social critique, at least in some of your work that you representing Rumi there. So I'd like to play this one particular passage of a performance of yours at the McDowell National Benefit.
What kind of lightning are you? Setting farms on fire. What kind of cloud are you? Raining down stones. What kind of hunter? Caught in your own trap. Thief. Stealing from your own house. If you're 60 years old, he says to the warmongers, you're 60 years old, you're 70 years old, and you're still uncooked. Still won't let love's flames near. Won't let them burn you up. Enamored, enthralled by stuff and status. Enthralled by stuff and status.
First, it's a fantastic performance.
Thank you.
But again, it depicts so well that the invitation to be free of our ego and our pride is not merely a personal matter. It's deeply personal, and it will have deep consequences for us as individuals, but it's also a social matter that will have profound impact upon our communities and upon our world. What does that kind of passage do for you that you've brought to us from Rumi? Give us a bit of commentary upon its own relevance for today, perhaps.
This passage is a wonderful sort of affirmation of what a lot of people are feeling and thinking when they look out upon the world. What kind of lightning are you setting farms on fire? Speaking to the destructive force that exists in mankind, right? What kind of cloud are you raining down stones? What kind of hunter caught in your own trap, a thief stealing from your own house? I mean, it's speaking to the warmongers who are wreaking havoc upon the earth and turning habitable land into uninhabitable land. So it's even more important now, 800 years later. Enthralled by stuff and status, he says, enthralled by stuff and status, the crown, the turban, the king's beard, thorns pricking your hands, and where is the flower, gazing in the mirror. I mean, he's speaking to the narcissism of leaders and people who are caught up in ego, who aren't actually seeing what they're doing, or they don't maybe even care, because they're very self-serving and enthralled by stuff and status. So how do we exit this way of going about things? This is humanity's evolution. It is. This is humanity's evolution, to be able to say, we can't do this anymore. We know what it is. We've seen the characters come through. We know what greed is. We know how it deceives. We know all these things. Why are we doing it again and again, making so many people's lives miserable? We can't do it anymore, because also the earth is burning in different ways. Climate change is real. And so in this time when there's so much crises, are we really also going to create more crises, or are we going to try to do the opposite and actually become humans that remedy and use our massive intelligence and massive hearts to create new ways and provide for this world, each other? Put solar panels on rooftops, put gardens on rooftops, retrofit buildings, clean up the oceans. Why are we worried about going to Mars right now? Clean up the ocean instead of going to Mars. We have a lot of work to do.
What sort of words of encouragement or what sort of words of challenge might you leave us with, as we do in our own day and age see the world burning in its various ways, that you would want us to take with us?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to say is it's important for us to step out of the bubbles that we may be in terms of information bubbles, and try to understand at least what each other is hearing, and also perhaps to open our ears to another thought that actually might be more truthful. I think it's important to do that right now, particularly because we seem to have different truths running at the same time. I also think it's important for us to take good care of ourselves and to speak out, speak from our hearts, speak of our wishes for what we want to see in the world, help each other out on a local level. Sometimes posting on Instagram might not be the most effective way to use our time. And that might be one way of being an activist, but also working in our local communities to help each other out is also a very important thing to do. You know, I'm thinking about also people living in flood zones and living in fire zones and what they're going through. And I'm thinking about people 6,000 miles away being bombed. And I'm thinking about people who are being picked up off the street and detained unlawfully. You know, so there's all kinds of things happening right now. It's overwhelming. And so we could do what we can to try to help each other, you know, and still enjoy our lives, cultivate our fruits. You know, when he says, whatever the ways of the world, what fruits do you bring? It's also okay to take time and really enjoy yourself, enjoy nature, enjoy the natural world. You have a right to be well. To all the people listening, you have a right to feel at ease and feel happy, as does everyone on this earth. And so hopefully we can help make that happen for us all.
I've been talking to poet, musician, and translator Haleh Liza Gafori, talking about her 2 volumes of translation of Rumi's poetry, Gold and Water. Haleh, thank you. This has been such a lovely conversation, and thank you for your beautiful work and generosity with your time with us today.
It's my pleasure, Lee. Thank you for all the wonderful questions and insights, too. It was really nice to speak to you.
Here's a closing take on our interview with Haleh Liza Gafori, part 2 in our series with the poets, asking them the question from poet Chris Wiman, who asked, what is poetry's role when the world is burning? I was particularly taken by this phrase from William Blake that I don't think I had ever heard before about our mind-forged manacles. It's hard work breaking those manacles, and it requires a great deal of persistence in breaking them again and again and again. As Haleh said, we chain ourselves up with our own thinking, our own dogma, and the invitation is to keep doing the work again, to actually feel as expansive and as relaxed as we can while we're here on this earth. Or then she said, at least let's not manufacture more pain with our minds. This relates, of course, as well to her invitation to consider the world's systems around us, that systems are created, she contended, based on the lust for dominion of a few, the greed of a few. Observing that, then, to ask ourselves, will we allow the psychotic or the patriarchal forces to keep taking over and over and over again and again? And instead to realize we're all interconnected. We all have only a finite amount of time on this earth. And what are we here to do? But perhaps to learn how to live in harmony, to live well. And then she said, when Rumi calls upon us to imagine this love, to feel this love within ourselves, it means to apply it in the world and to walk this world with that love. Even possibly to imagine that legislation, our systems, could reflect love instead of simply reflect greed and fear. And last, this invitation to joy without shame. The Russian novelist Dostoevsky is famed for the line from one of his books, one of his novels, beauty will save the world. And I add, well, perhaps joy and rightful enjoyment will too. And thus Rumi here, feeling guilt for feeling pleasure, that's your sin, that's your chain, shatter it, tear it off, then invite the Puritans over. Today is an invitation to ecstasy. And that this invitation to ecstasy, Haleh reminds us, is an invitation to love, a sort of non-calculating, generous, ecstatic state of being, a constant invitation to experience joy, and not to feel shame for joy, not feel guilt for a deep pleasure, for the experience of being alive. There is and can be a tremendous natural joy there, she reminds us, and the invitation to feel that, uncover it, well, just ditch the vinegar and ditch the vendor who does not deal in life's nectar. That's a small, but not so small closing take on today's episode. You've been listening to No Small Endeavor and our interview with poet, musician, and translator Haleh Liza Gafori. We gratefully acknowledge the support of Lilly Endowment Incorporated, a private philanthropic foundation supporting the causes of community development, education, and religion. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible: Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Carriet Harmon, Jason Cheesley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studio.